video was produced in order to help our chapters with their year-end reporting. One of the last duties of the chapter president and treasurer is to prepare and submit year-end reports for their chapter for the year ending April 30th. These reports are due by May 15th. There are basically two parts to these reports. One is the bulletin verification, and the other are online reports concerning hours and finance. Let's begin with the bulletin material. By mid-March, the chapter president should have received a packet from NAJA headquarters at her home address marked Bulletin Material, Deadline Material Enclosed. If the president has not received this packet by mid-March, she should contact headquarters immediately. Staff can scan another copy and send via email if necessary. Enclosed in this packet are 4 forms which must be corrected and returned to NAJA. There are also various pages of instructions provided. The first thing the president should do is to look at the form and instructions for Bulletin Project information. The form is a copy of your chapter's page from the current bulletin. The instructions tell you how to make corrections to this form. Follow the directions explicitly. Okay, grab your red pen and let's go. If any chapter information is incorrect, then draw a single line through what needs to be changed and provide updated information. Each of your service projects are listed below the general chapter information. If you will not be doing one of these service projects for the upcoming year, then draw a single line through the entire project and its description. If only the name of the project has changed, then draw a line through the name and enter the new name. If you still do the project, but the description has changed, then make necessary edits. If you have totally new service projects, write the name and the description under New Service Projects. The description should begin with a past tense of a verb, and a suggested list of verbs was included in the packet for your convenience. The last thing that needs to be done with this section is to determine which project or projects are considered to be your child welfare or national service project, and place an asterisk to the right of the title. Continue down the form to finance projects and continue the same process, drawing a line through any finance project listed that the chapter will not be doing the next year. If you are keeping the project, consider entering the amount that the fundraiser cleared for the year just ending. This helps other chapters determine the most successful fundraisers for certain areas or size communities. The last section of this form is about the public relations that your chapter uses. Again, strike through any media that will probably not be utilized and add any new avenues for publicizing the great work that you're doing in your communities. The next pages to look at are titled the Bulletin Verification Listing. There is also an instruction page for these pages. The list that you are sent from headquarters in the packet is a list of the membership of your chapter as it appears in the NAJA database. The list will be of all your members that we have entered in the system: active, associate, life, non-resident, or sustaining. It is to this list that you will make all corrections so that status changes are noted and address changes are made. You must work with the treasurer on this report since dues paid are a vital piece of information for its completion. Let's talk about some examples. If an active member has dropped, then you will place a D in the blank to the left of her name. This would also be the case for any active member who has not yet paid her $65 in dues. If she later pays her dues, then you can reinstate her by contacting headquarters at any time. If she pays the dues before the dues statement is mailed in by the chapter with your payment, then she can be added to that statement and reinstated by forwarding her dues and her name. If an active member is currently on leave of absence, then write in LOA in the blank. Remember that active members on leave are still required to pay active dues. If an active member has completed her 5 1/2 years and is asked to be moved to associate and has paid her $35 in dues, then put an A in the blank to the left of her name. If an active member has completed her 5 1/2 years and has paid $350, she can be moved straight to life, and an L would be written in the blank to the left of that name. If an associate member did not pay $35 in dues by the time this report is due, then she must also be dropped by placing a D beside her name. This member can also be reinstated if dues are subsequently paid. If an associate member is making her final payment, then she can be marked with an L, since she will then be a life member. If any member of your chapter is deceased, please use the code DE. We also need for the chapter to make any address changes that have occurred for any member. This will ensure that the member continues to receive the Crownlet or any other written correspondence sent from headquarters. Please help us with the address changes. Pass the list around at chapter meetings and ask other members to help with this process. Another very successful means of getting corrected addresses for associate or life members is to solicit the help of a few of them in this process. If there are members of your chapter that are not on the bulletin verification list, please add their name and address along with their status. Previously dropped members will not be on the list, so if they need to be reinstated, please add their name. Call headquarters if you need to know the amount of dues owed and collect that amount before adding back to the chapter list. One reason a name may not be on the list is because headquarters never received a membership card. If you are unsure, you may contact headquarters. New provisionals are added to the database when we get membership cards on them. Do not add these names to this list. Instead, contact headquarters to receive cards that can then be filled out and mailed in. They can be included in the packet of forms that the chapter must mail back by May 15th. We ask that you also please check the spelling of all names because members receive a life certificate from headquarters with their first, maiden, and last name. We certainly want these to be correct. The completion of this form is most important as the chapter will receive a due statement in June based on what is reported on this list. If a change needs to be made or if a member has not paid dues, it is important that the correct notation is made at this point. Members cannot be dropped after May 15th and prior to paying the dues statement, so make sure dues have been collected or the member has a D by her name. You can always add someone back to the statement. You just cannot take them off of the statement. If a member has to be dropped for non-payment of dues, we do ask that you continue to try and collect those dues. We do not want to lose any members, and we hope that you don't want to either. Before mailing, the person or persons completing this form should sign her name under the word completed so that headquarters will have a contact name for any questions. Another page in the packet deals with public relations information that is needed by NAJA. We want to know the newspapers, radio stations, TV stations, or chambers that are located in your area. The information already listed has been previously submitted by your chapter. If any of this information has changed, please make corrections to the existing contacts. If there is any new media, please add the name and contact information, including email address, in the blanks provided. The last page that needs to be completed in this packet is a list of the officers and committee chairs for the coming year. We only need name and email addresses since you've already made any address changes on a prior form, right? Okay, that completes this portion of the year-end reports called Bulletin Information. Mail the forms back to NAJA at P.O. Box 1873, Greenville, Mississippi 38702. Please make a copy so that if there are any questions, you can answer them. Also, just in case the mailman loses your packet, you can provide headquarters with a copy. That could be a real lifesaver. Because the May 15th deadline is part of the Efficiency Award, I would take the packet to the post office and get a stamped receipt with the date. Write on the receipt what was mailed, bulletin, information. This could be your proof of timely filing should the packet go missing. Now to the next part of the year-end reports. These 3 reports are to be filed online at the NAJA website. On the left-hand side of the home page, second line down, you'll see a link called Chapter Year-End Reports. It is from here that you will file the Statistical Data Report, the Statement of Cash Balances Report, and the ASR for your chapter year-end April 30th, 2016. You can begin to play around with these reports after April 1, but the final data should not be entered until the close of the chapter year, April 30th. You have until May 15th at midnight to complete. Actually, I'll not be waking up at midnight to print a report, so you're safe until at least 9 a.m. on the 16th. I just wouldn't try to cut it that close. The first step after clicking on the link is to put in your username and password. Your username is your chapter name, followed by a period, followed by your state, with no spaces in between. That is, unless your chapter is a county chapter or made up of more than one city. For example, if your chapter is a city like Greenville, Mississippi, you would enter the name of your city, a period, and the 2-digit state abbreviation, no spaces. If your chapter is a county chapter like Madison County, Florida, or Wayne County, Mississippi, you would put the name of the county and then a space, followed by the word county, spelled out, then a period, and the state abbreviation with no space between the Y in county, the period, and the state. The only space is between the name of the county and the word county. If your chapter name is made up of 2 cities, then there is a dash between the 2 names. This dash should be included but no spaces. Therefore, there would only be 1 space in your username. This sounds more confusing than it is, I promise. The first letter of each word is capitalized, and the state abbreviation is in all caps. One clue is to look at how your chapter name is written in the bulletin. This will give you some insight into how to make the entry for the username. The password for all chapters is NAJA. Whew. After making the username so difficult, I know you're glad the password is simple. Now you are into the site where you will enter info for all 3 reports for your chapter. This first screen gives you 6 options. 3 options to submit reports and 3 options to view reports. When you are working on the reports, it will always be from the Submit link. Then, after a specific report is submitted, you can view that report and make a copy for your files. Let's start with the information needed for the first link, the statistical data form. The President has this form in the President's Notebook behind tab 7. On the form, the figures needed for the online report can be compiled prior to entering the information online. You will need to know the number of actives that were in your chapter at the beginning of the year, May 1, and the number of actives that were in your chapter at the end of the year, April 30th. You also will need to enter the number of provisionals your chapter took in for the year. The next section down asks you to give NAJA the reasons given for any member that dropped during the year. This information helps NAJA, and especially its membership committee, to know what resources or changes are needed to keep these members for the long haul. Now we get to the part on this report where you will be entering the number of hours worked by your chapter members. The numbers used here will be gathered from hour sheets filled out at least monthly by each member. The hours on this report are broken down into 5 main categories: service projects, finance projects, administration, education, and provisionals. Under each category are subcategories. For example, under service projects, NAJA wants total hours worked by specific groups to be entered separately. Active member hours are on one line, associate and life member hours are on another, and any service hours of non-resident members are on a third line. For each line, NAJA asks for the number of members involved, the number of hours served, and the number of people served. Please give us your best estimate of people served, as we want this number for statistical purposes. One point of clarification that I have been asked before is about dropped members. You should include hours for active members that dropped during the year. The hours were still served. For finance project hours, we ask that active member hours be delineated from associate and life member hours, and again, the number of members and the total number of hours. And as before, just because an active member has dropped before the end of the year, if she worked on a finance project, include her hours in the total. The third category is administration. These are hours worked to organize, administer, and operate junior auxiliary both locally and nationally. These hours should also be noted on individual hour sheets. Community surveys are administrative hours. Researching projects are administrative hours. Executive committee meeting and other committee meetings are administrative hours. Planning the provisional class training are administrative hours. Another subcategory under administration is national administration. If you have an active associate or life member of your chapter serving at the national level, please contact that representative and get her hours to report on that line. The fourth category is education. These hours will be totaled from the hour sheets and should just be counted for active members, not associate or life members. However, if an active member drops during the year, you can still use her hours in your total numbers. Subcategories are AEC, area meeting, chapter board training, chapter meetings, and various other ways chapter members can receive ed hours. Total these hours for each subcategory and place the number of members and the number of hours for each line. The fifth category is provisional hours. All hours worked by provisionals go to education and are reported on a separate line from active members. Enter the number of provisionals and their total hours. At the very end of this report, NAJA asks about your chapter's involvement with your associate and/or life members. Mark yes or no from the drop-down box and indicate the type of involvement in the same way. Now that all the data has been entered, hit Submit. If you need to go back to this report to make edits, you can easily do that from the Submit Statistical Data link. You can change any numbers you need to and then click the word Submit again. With any subsequent submission, you will see the following statement on the next screen. Submission not complete. Please read below. And then, previous submission found. Click here to submit a replacement. And you must click the word Here to replace the previous submission and to make your edit stick. This gives you a chance to back out of the changes you've made if you decide that you made one in error. Now that the report has been submitted, go to the link called View Submitted Statistical Data Form, where you can see what was submitted, check your figures again, and print that copy for your file. The second report to be filed is the Statement of Cash Balances. The Treasurer for the year just ending has a blank copy of this form on page 28 of the Treasurer's Manual and should be the person that completes this report. Either the treasurer or the president can enter the data online. This report should not be completed until after April 30th and after the bank statements have been received so that the bank accounts can be reconciled. I want to make a special note as we proceed. On this form, commas should not be used in figures. To begin with, the balances from the beginning of the year are entered on lines 2 and 3. The checking account balance and other accounts are on 2 separate lines. This is where I hope the treasurer and or president from the past year kept a copy of what was filed so that the ending balances at that time are brought forward as the beginning balances from A1. If for some really good reason you do not have a copy of this report, please contact your CSC or headquarters. But we will hope that instructions were followed last year and a copy is available to you. On lines 6 through 9, the various income items will be entered from your year-end income statement. Dues, the net profit made on your finance projects, which is the income less the expenses, any interest earned, and then everything else totaled in one line under other receipts. We do need you to list what makes up the amount on line 9 in a Word document format so that it can be downloaded for review. At the top of this document, be sure to put the chapter name and year. And to the right of line 9 is a Browse button where you can locate the file in your documents and attach it. The receipts will then automatically total. Lines 12 through 15 deal with chapter expenses as listed on your year-end income statement, and totals should be entered for the dues paid to NAJA on 12, any donations made by your chapter on line 13, and the net cost of your service projects on 14. Many times you will not have any income associated with your service projects, but sometimes there are donations made on behalf of a project, so just put the net cost on 14. Expenses less income. Line 15 is for any other expenses your chapter incurred for the year. You will also need to add a breakdown of the other expenses for line 15 like you did for line 9 in income. This must be in Word doc format. Line 17, which is either an increase or a decrease in the amount of cash held for the year, will automatically calculate, as will line 18, the book balance at year end of any accounts your chapter holds. You will then need to enter the year-end reconcile balance of your checking account on line 20 and the reconcile balances of any other accounts on line 21. The total of these two amounts would then be entered on line 22. Remember that the amounts on lines 20 and 21 are not necessarily the amounts on the bank statements. If there are deposits in transit or checks that have not cleared, these need to be considered. If you use a software like QuickBooks, there's a way to reconcile your bank statements very easily. If you still get hard copies of bank statements, the instructions for reconciling the bank balance to book balance are usually on the back of your statement. Okay, now go to the View Cash Statement of Balances and make sure that lines 18 and 22 are equal, that your book balance equals your reconciled bank balance. If it does not, then you must search for the errors. Once the report balances, print a copy for the files that would be handed down to the next treasurer. The third report to be filed online is the ASR, the Annual Standards Review. This report is a list of the minimum standards of the association and asks you to enter yes or no as to whether your chapter met this standard. No is the default answer, so if your chapter did meet the standard, you must click on the drop-down box and click on yes. Some of the standards may need a little explanation, so I will address those next. Question 3, ask if the chapter is on a financial basis satisfactory to the association. The rule of thumb is that a chapter should have at least 1 year of expenses in reserve. So look at the expenses for the year just completed and compare that to the amount of cash on hand. Is the cash on hand at least enough to cover 1 year's expenses? If so, then you can answer yes to this question. Question 10, ask if the chapter keeps uniform records concerning all junior auxiliary activities of its members. Does your chapter have a permanent record form for all members that are updated yearly as to their hours, committees, meetings attended, etc.? If so, you can answer yes to that question. Having a form on each member that records their activities for the year is the way a chapter determines if an active member gets credit for that year or falls short and must repeat the year. Question 11 refers to the filing of all year-end reports with headquarters. This is the process that you are completing now: the bulletin verification information and the online reports. Question 14, ask if the chapter required that each member meet the requirements of a specific class of membership as stated in the bylaws. That refers basically to the requirements for the various classes of members: provisional, active, associate, life, and non-resident. Were your provisional members required to serve 6 months while completing the provisional course? Did your active members get the required 24 service hours and 12 education hours and attend the minimum number of chapter meetings required by NAJA and your chapter? If a member is an associate member, did she serve her 5½ years before being allowed to change status? And if so, did she pay her associate dues? Did any non-resident members pay their dues? And if they're working off their active years, did they report hours to your chapter? This question can be answered yes if your chapter required your members to meet expected criteria. The other questions are self-explanatory and should be answered yes or no. Although NAJA headquarters and your CSC will determine whether the chapter has actually met these standards, by reviewing this list, the chapter leadership is given the opportunity to ascertain for themselves any weaknesses. The final step is to click on the word Submit in the lower right-hand corner and then click on the link to view the report just submitted. Print a copy again for your chapter files. You are now prepared to complete the year-end reporting required by NAJA. If you have any questions, please contact your CSC or NAJA headquarters. And don't forget, you're also required to send a copy of your chapter's constitution to najanet@bellsouth.net. Make sure any changes made during the year are highlighted.